Hi, Des here. I was just watching Sargon of Akkad's new vid, This Week in Stupid for the 19th of June, and listening to some of the things he's been saying at the start of his vid that I didn't know about the current E3 2016, which has happened at a similar time to the Orlando shooting in Florida, which is the biggest deadly shooting in US history. 50 people were killed by a lone gunman. And for some reason, people in the video games industry, games journalists, I don't know, they've been taking it as a new time to look at gun violence, especially when going to E3 and questioning all the games that are like first-person shooters, like I suppose Battlefield 1 that I'm interested in, and a bunch of others in which there's standard unrealistic violence in video games, and it does not influence people in real life to commit acts. I feel like I've been fighting this sort of bullshit, these kind of bullshit scapegoats of video games since the late 90s, when there was the Colombine high school massacre, in which a couple high school kids went into their school in Colorado and killed 13 people. I think they committed suicide in the process, and they injured a lot more. And people jumped on the fact that they watched violent films and played Doom and a few other violent video games and just said, oh well, they're obviously to blame. They're the reason these kids are doing this. It's the culture, it's the media that they watch. No, it's not. These are individuals who have been shaped this way through upbringing and were probably prone to this sort of action themselves. And sorry to say that the fact that guns are widely available in America probably facilitated this. I know lots of people like to defend the right to bear arms in the Constitution, but I really think that just the ease of being able to get a weapon, I know people say that's a dumb thing just to say, oh well, it's not that's causing all these shootings and things. It's not causing them, certainly, but the ease of being able to get a weapon or having a weapon in your house already. If you're an off-kilter individual who's just likely to do this sort of crap anyway, which I'd probably put down to how they're screwed over by their nation or their government or poverty, and, you know, people who have this kind of life are ready to lash out anyway. And it just takes that ease of being able to have the agency and the, I hate that word, the ability, the free ability to act on your thoughts or your words in a violent way. If you have the means to enact something like that, you're going to use it. Over here in Britain, I think guns are hard to come by. People who live in mansions do like clay pigeon shooting, and there are other kinds of hunting where you can license a gun, I think, but the laws are a lot stricter, so gun violence isn't a very common thing in Britain. Nowhere near as common as it is in America. I know there are good people who own guns, I know that, and so whatever you feel about it, that's not the point here. The point is that I don't think video games cause violence. I don't think they inspire it, I don't think they influence it. I don't think someone who's played first-person shooters all their life, it's going to put thoughts in your head like, wow, I could do this sort of stuff in real life because I can move a mouse and click. No, I mean, paintball, slightly closer, but again, I don't think if someone's been playing paintball or whatever it is, airsoft, I still don't think that's going to put them in mind of going into a public meeting place, just attacking a bunch of people they don't like. There's the other stuff to consider, like guilt. I still doubt they'd inspire something as fearful and guilt-inducing as going into a public place and ending someone's timeline and their presence in the world. Doing something very viscerally, like, real, and that you could get in trouble for. They're going to find you eventually. People are good at this stuff when it's their job in the police force. I mean, you can't really escape when you've done something like that. I suppose that's why most shootings in the history of America seem to end with the shooter taking their own life, as they know they probably can't avoid being caught, unless you're this kind of person who's like that already through upbringing. It's not media that inspires you to do this kind of crap. You have to have that mindset in your mind where you got this purposeful thing where you're building up to something you know you're not going to come back from, like this is the last straw. And I think it's like poverty and being fucked up by your nation or fucked over by your governments. You know, you build up to this point where you're at a decisive moment. You're going to go out with a bang, you're going to take the people you don't like with you or make a statement. If you're at that decisive moment, then of course if guns are easy to get or you've already got one in your house, you're just going to find it a lot easier to go through with the thing you were thinking of. But yeah, games do have guns. They've always had guns. Films have a lot of guns. I'm always surprised at how many guns you see in films. I was watching Captain America Civil War a couple of months ago for, I don't know, the third time or something. I was quite surprised at how many guns are in that film. I was just going, is this a superhero movie I'm watching? Everyone seems to be toting some kind of automatic rifle in this superhero movie. That's not me really questioning the film's... I mean, it's just the type of film it was, really. Like, I didn't expect to see that many guns in a superhero film. It's annoying when games or films try to be realistic with their violence. I don't think games really have approached the point when they're trying to be actually realistic with their violence. People always complain about things like Mortal Kombat, where there's all this super crazy violence and they're like, oh, you're glamorizing violence, it's violence porn, there's blood everywhere. It's not realistic in the slightest what you see in Mortal Kombat. They're like pulling people's hearts out and like bending rib cages and freeze people in midair. It's not remotely realistic, and I don't think that inspires violence at all. It just doesn't take into account what violence in reality is actually like. I think the people who are closer to committing violence in real life are people like ISIS, who are used to seeing what doing it in reality is like because they've lived in war zones for quite a long time and they see this real stuff for so long that they're quite a lot closer to it than someone in the Western world who's middle class and plays video games. I don't think you can really end violence in films or guns in films because they kind of reflect the real world, and that's what the real world is like. These things happen. There is a lot of gun ownership in America, and a lot of people find it fun identifying guns, but I think there's a disconnect there. They show what guns can do mechanically, but they're ignoring what guns do biologically and psychologically to a target. I don't think people think about that when they're at the gun range. I think having guns in games is pretty harmless, and what it is kind of a little tool for fun, a little enabling tool that helps you to interact with the world. You know, you've got your mouse and you can point this object you're holding and it will deliver things to the target that will affect the target, and then points will rise and the target will change somehow. I mean, you can look at the gun in Portal and say that that's doing the same thing, even though it ends no one's life. I mean, no fucking gun in a game has ever ended anyone's life, but, you know, frags, we're talking about the fictional kills of a game. There are no frags when you use the Portal gun, just kind of, but you are doing the same thing. You are firing off a little thing that affects something in the distance and changes it, and that's the purpose of that. It's like, then there's the gravity gun in Half-Life 2, where you've got a gun-like thing, it's got a target and you point the mouse and it picks up a cube, and then it lets go of the cube or imparts momentum onto the cube and flings it, or whatever, a bin, a piece of furniture. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that in the game, especially in first-person games. You've got something down the bottom of your view which represents your ability to affect the world. And if you don't have that, the game is less fun, because it's like, you know, great white sharks. Great white sharks. There have been shark attacks on humans before, and when you go into a shark cage with the sharks, they're all trying to, it looks like they're all coming in to bite you. I think there's a theory that's gone around that since a shark doesn't have any appendages like hands or anything to feel with, the way it wants to interact with the world is to feel things with its mouth. I don't know how true this is or not, but I've heard this as a theory, is that a great white shark will come up and explore something like, if it goes to the surface and it sees the shape of a boat, its curiosity will be manifested in kind of biting and holding things in its mouth, you know? Jeez, I don't know where I'm going with that bit, but anyway. This is an extension of a human limb in a video game. You have to have a way of interacting with the world, and these guns are one of those ways of showing a simple way of doing it. But then another thing that goes hand in hand with that, being able to move your mouse and your crosshair and fire off a few projectiles at something, is the movement. So you haven't just got looking around with the mouse and firing. You've got WASD, moving forwards, back, left and right, and jumping, and it's always quite fun just to, you know, run up a ramp and jump off the ramp, and timing as well. You manage to do something with your reactions at a split-second time that sends a few grenades out of your gun just while you're performing this crazy jump maneuver. Getting them on target feels satisfying, and then you get the points for that. Some people like the competitive nature where you get points and scores for things. I don't necessarily like that, but it's fun. It's like parkour, you know. You run and you jump off stuff and you perform a cool move, and you get a satisfaction thing from that. And I don't think there's anything bad about that. Sometimes I get bored of a gun game and I'll move on to a different thing, like a real-time strategy, which is a top-down view. Of course, you've got weapons of war milling around, like tanks and things, but it provides a setting, you know. You've got a link to history. People know what a tank is, they know what a unit of soldiers is. Even though these are all essentially weapons of war, there's precedent for these things in history. This story world to work with that involves commanding masses of different units to different places on a map, finding out things. I mean, it's not just like the attacking that is a part of those games. It's like going through the shadows and finding out where the enemy is, and working out strategy of how you're going to be attacked from which direction. It's more about the use of space and the use of your movement through the world and how you affect things that is more important than any of the guns, which are representations of things we use to give setting. But again, I don't know how you're gonna ever be a general in the real world if you've played Command and Conquer Generals. There's a great disconnect between reality and this fiction that you're playing. You're moving little tanks around the map. I don't think it takes into account any of the bureaucracy and the conversations you have with your staff and things as a general, and how you're just not able to get things to happen, and how you're not even seeing this map from above like some sort of god. Most of the time, if you're a general, you're sat in offices going from place to place talking to people about what they can tell you about how your war is taking place. You're not often seeing it firsthand. Even in the old days, I guess, in medieval times or antiquity, if you're a general, maybe you are in the battle, but you're on a horse in one place and you can't see all of it like you can in these games where you play Empire Total War or Medieval Total War. You're zooming around all over the map. You can see everything that no realistic general in history could ever see. That's not realism. You can't train to be a general from playing a game. You can't know things about reality from doing this sort of stuff. So for people to go, ban guns in games, it's inciting violence, we must remove all guns in game. No, why would you do something like that? There's no connection between the two things. It's the same as blaming Colombine on Doom. Those two kids didn't walk into Colombine High School and do all that stuff because they've had access to Doom. No. Just because they had access to Duke Nukem and Wolfenstein did not add to their decision that they were going to go in that day and do that thing. It's the nature of where these two kids, Eric and Dylan, were in their heads that day, and how they were brought up and what they'd been going through. That's what made them decide to do that. And I don't think there's been any connection with Omar Mateen, who did the Orlando shootings and video games anyway, so I don't know what that's about either. I'm sure Anita Sarkeesian is coming out of the woodwork right now, trying to find a way to blame it all on video games. That was a rant. Anyway, give me a like if you found this video vaguely interesting, subscribe, especially if you like gaming, and comment below if you have any thoughts of the matter. Whether you think video games contribute to violence in society, personally I don't think so, but you know, if someone can convince me otherwise, have a go. Thanks for watching.